Evening everyone, welcome to RCN Scotland's Fair Pay for Nursing question and answer session. The plan for this evening is to go through with you guys where we are in relation to pay since the offer was made earlier this year and implemented by Scottish Government. Talk through with you where we are in terms of our thinking about pay and our movement towards an indicative ballot, which you will have received email about already from Civica. I'm going to do a presentation which will take us through where we've got to today, and then Graham and I will happily answer any questions that you have. I'm Norman Provan. I'm the Associate Director of the Royal College of Nursing in Scotland, and I manage the trade union and the legal functions of the RCN in Scotland, and I'll let Graham introduce himself.
I'm Graham Revie. I'm the Chair of the Trade Union Committee, and welcome members. Great to be back and having a chat with you, so fantastic, thanks.
Okay, so we'll just press on. So in terms of the pay campaign from a Scotland perspective, you will remember that back in the summer of 2020, the RCN asked all members what pay award they felt that they were due in this current year. And it's the first time we've undertaken a survey like that, and the principle here is that the ask that we have for pay for this year is based on what members told us that they thought that we should ask for. So members have already had their say about how much of a pay rise they thought they deserved. And the aim following that consultation with members was a Fair Pay for Nursing campaign, and its aim was to secure a fully funded 12.5% pay increase for all nursing staff covered by Agenda for Change terms and conditions, and that was as part of a one-year deal that applied equally across all bands. The campaign is about not just the money, although the money of course is important. I think one of the things that people have to understand about this pay campaign is it's about recognising the complexity, the skills and the responsibility and experience that you guys demonstrate every single day by support workers, assistant practitioners, nursing associates in England and registered nurses all over the UK. We need to make sure that people understand that nursing is a safety critical profession, and if we're ever going to reach safe staffing levels, we need to fill the tens of thousands of unfilled nursing jobs that there are in the UK, and there are thousands of them in Scotland. We need to recognise that salaries for not too many nurses have just not kept pace with inflation over the last 10 years. People feel undervalued, and how are we going to attract people into the profession if we don't get the right value for them and people feel respected and they feel that they're being paid properly for the job that they do. So if you want to move on to the next slide. Thanks, Russ. So we have different pay offers and awards in a UK perspective. In Scotland, the Scottish Government decided not to remit the pay review body. So as many of you will know, traditionally NHS pay has been a four-country endeavour, in that each of the countries submit evidence to the pay review body, as do the government and as do the health trade unions, and they come out with a recommendation. But the Scottish Government decided that they weren't going to use that process, and instead they wanted to have direct negotiations with the unions in Scotland, and that had been the case indeed since before the last 3-year pay deal. So in Scotland we began with pay negotiations with the Scottish Government, and in March the Scottish Government offered a pay award of on average 4%. For people in Agenda for Change terms and conditions in Scotland. They did agree to backdate it instead of from April 21 to December 2020, and that was to recognise the exceptional work that people had done over the course of the pandemic. Most of the unions in Scotland accepted that, most of the health trade unions, only 2 health trade unions in Scotland didn't, ourselves and GMB have subsequently decided that they are going to take no action. However, RCN members in Scotland rejected the offer, but in May, as most of the unions had accepted it, the Scottish Government implemented the pay award, so people by and large have received their 4%. In Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Executive have yet to announce a pay award. They haven't yet committed to anything, so they're a bit further behind than the rest. And in England and Wales, they're in a slightly different position from Scotland, in that they have made an offer of 3% for staff which again, from an RCN perspective, remains unacceptable. It's also worth stating that in England, the award is not fully funded. Only 2.1% has been added to the health budget. So they're expecting individual organisations down in England to make up the rest of the 3%, which in essence means they're taking money out of patient care to give to people for pay, which is not acceptable to us. We had stated it had to be fully funded and committed to separately for money that goes into care. So from a Scotland perspective, bands 1 and 4 we're getting a flat uplift of £1,009, which is slightly above 4%. Bands 5 to 7 would get a straight 4% uplift, and the awards for band 8 and 9 originally was offered at 2%, but following further discussion over summer has been increased to 3% by the Scottish Government. If you want to move on to the next slide. Thank you. So there's been quite a lot of press over the course of the summer in relation to the RCN Scotland's views in relation to pay. Some of those are on the slide that you can see. Broadly, we've had a lot of support from people saying that the offer is unacceptable and making it clear to ministers and others that they were going to have to do more on pay. Over the last week, there's been a significant increase in the amount of press stuff that we've had around pay since we made the decision about what we were going to do next in relation to your pay. So just moving us on. So one of the important things that in principle for the RCN in relation to pay is that the decisions that are made need to be made by the members. So it's important that you guys have your say. You need to instruct us as to what you think we should do in relation to this pay award. So the RCN asked members how they feel about the pay offer via consultative ballot, and that happened earlier on this year following the 4% offer. And that ballot was used to find out how you felt about your pay. 27% of our members in Scotland who were eligible to vote voted in that, and almost 70% of them rejected the offer. So that was quite a significant number of members saying to us, 4% is not acceptable, it's not enough, they're going to have to do better. So if enough RCN members are unhappy with the pay, an indicative ballot is the next step that might be conducted. So an indicative ballot is where we're at right now. And what you do with an indicative ballot is we're asking members whether they, in principle, would want to take any form of industrial action. We can't ignore the fact that 70% of you decided to reject the 4%. So we have to ask you, what do you want us to do now then? Are you prepared to take any form of industrial action to try and force a better pay deal? It's important that people understand that in terms of an indicative ballot, there is no statutory rules or legislation governing how the RCN conducts that ballot. But neither do these ballots give grounds to take industrial action, and I'll cover that off later on in the slide when I talk about other forms of action. So over the course of the summer, the RCN entered into dispute with the government, and that's the first stage of being able to take any kind of industrial action. We are obliged by law to enter dispute with Scottish Government to make it clear to them that we are unhappy with the offer that they have made, and any further action that could be taken is predicated in taking that initial step, and the RCN did that over the course of the summer. So we are technically in dispute with Scottish Government around NHS pay in Scotland. If you want to move us on, Ross. So let's take a closer look at what we mean by an indicative ballot. An indicative ballot is where members tell us what they think we should do in relation to this, and what steps we should take if the government does not improve the award once this is fed back to them. In Scotland, almost 70% of our members rejected the pay offer, and the government implemented it anyway, mainly because the majority of other unions accepted the 4%. Over the course of the summer, we sought further negotiation and improvement, and therefore we hoped the Scottish Government would be able to put more money on the table. They made a slight adjustment, as I stated earlier, by saying that bands 8 and 9, they would increase their offer to them from 2% to 3%, but that wasn't enough for the vast majority of our members who had voted against. So at this point in time, the indicative ballot asks you what you personally are willing to do in terms of taking any forms of industrial action. And it's also going to ask you about whether or not you would be supportive of any colleagues taking industrial action, even if you had decided that you personally would not do so. Those results will allow the RCN to assess the strength of feeling that you are saying to us amongst the membership. And there are a couple of things that are crucially important here. Turnout is really important. Just sitting and not voting doesn't help us. We need to get a very clear message from the members in Scotland about what action you want us to take next and what action you're personally willing to take should you wish to take any form of industrial action. We'll be asking people whether in principle they're willing to take any form of industrial action, and we will then continue to work directly with the Scottish Government to try and get them to improve the pay award. So on to the next slide, Ross. So taking a closer look at an indicative ballot, there are three questions on the paper that we're going to ask, but I'm going to cover off what they are. Those questions are whether or not you personally would be willing to take part in industrial action short of strike action, whether or not you would be willing to take industrial action including strike action, or if you're not willing to take industrial action, whether or not you are willing to support action taken by others. And that third question, even if you've answered yes to 1 and 2, we still ask you to answer that question of whether or not you'll be able to support other people who are taking industrial action. But it's important that people understand what different types of industrial action are and what they would commit you to do. So the first one, action short of strike action, is a form of industrial action, but it doesn't involve the complete withdrawal of your labour. It's commonly known by people as working to rule, and there's a number of things that you would normally do. So for example, you would take all of your breaks, and I know that many people don't just now take all of their breaks. You would start on time, you would finish on time, you wouldn't do any additional hours over the contracted hours that you have, and you wouldn't cover for other people who were on strike. You wouldn't do jobs that aren't nursing jobs, so you would only do the things that are contained within your contract. Strike action, on the other hand, is a withdrawal of your labour. That's when you're saying to your employer, I will not be at my work, I will take time off of my work to strike. And those days would be set in advance, and there are certain rules that we have to apply to all of that. But it could be for half a day or for a day or even longer, and it could be a number of days over a number of weeks where we would ask members to take industrial action by striking and not turning up at their work. In terms of the NMC code, one of the questions that I often get asked by people when we're talking about any form of industrial action is, are there risks to me as a registrant from an NMC code perspective? And the answer is yes, there are to some extent. Industrial action in principle does not amount to a breach of your code of conduct, but there are other actions that you could take which could be regarded as misconduct. However, the NMC does accept in principle that nurses can strike, and they have published their own recommendations about strike action, and all of that information can be followed to show you what's right and wrong. But the RCN always approaches this from a very professional point of view. So any action that we would ask you to take, or take if you voted to take industrial action, would follow what's called the life-preserving care model. And in that model, we would still protect patients and comply with the law. And that means that life-preserving services such as emergency care would be continue to be provided with roughly the amount of staff that you might employ in a public holiday or Christmas Day when levels of activity tend to be lower. There are other things that we would do to help to protect the safety of patients. Those are called derogations. And derogations ensure that employers can maintain safe staffing levels by making a member or service exempt from taking part. And that's normally done by negotiation. So employers might come and say, you know, there are certain areas where we have patients with very high dependency. So we would say, will you not take any action in those areas? And we might agree that that's an area for derogation. So we would say, yes, okay, in those circumstances, we wouldn't ask people in that particular ward or department to take strike action, but other departments we would. People should understand that there are some consequences of taking industrial action. So an employer can withhold payment for you for each day that you take strike action. And the RCN will make a strike benefit fund available to eligible members who require it. It's discretionary and it's not intended to replace a member's expected daily earnings, but it's supposed to be a supportive contribution to help to reduce the financial impact of you taking industrial action. And derogations might also be extended to members who might suffer long-term financial loss. So somebody may want to go on strike but feels that just financially they can't possibly afford to. So we might say to them, well, it's legitimate for you not to take strike action in those circumstances, and that would be another area of derogation. So if we can move on to the next slide. there's a lot of rules around taking industrial action, and I'm going to play, Ross is going to play a short video for you. It's a video about the RCN Industrial Action Handbook, which is a resource that members can access online that tells you everything that you need to know about industrial action. So when you're making your decision about what you personally are willing to do, you can have a look at this book and tells you all the rules and all the things that would be obliged to do. It's not a long video. If you've got sound on, that's great. It's only music that plays in the background. There isn't any speaking or narrative. So everything that's on the small YouTube clip that you will see appears on the screen, and in the background it's just music. So if you don't have sound on, don't worry about it. You're not missing any spoken word. It's just sound in the background. So if you could just play that for me, Ross. So as you can see, it's just a minute long, and it's a resource that any member can access, and it tells them all of the rules and all of the things that you have to be aware of if you're considering taking any form of industrial action. If you just move on to the next one, that's helpful. So just some of the logistics now about our indicative ballot. Our indicative ballot opened yesterday. So Tuesday, yesterday was the start of the indicative ballot, and members will receive an email from Civica with a direct link for them to cast their vote. The deadline for filling in is at the beginning of November, so you have a few weeks and a weekend and a couple of days beyond that just to do your ballot. It's an electronic ballot, and it's conducted by an independent scrutineer called Civica. That ensures that this is completely transparent. They check that members are eligible to vote. Nobody can interfere with the process, and they, at the end of the period of time, feed back to us the results from them. And the ballot, of course, closes in early November. So members who work in the NHS in Scotland and are employed on Agenda for Change terms and conditions will be sent an email. That email will be from rcn@accessvotes.com, and that will contain a unique link for their vote. Those without an email on the system will receive a letter for them giving them instruction how to vote. Members will be asked the 3 questions. Are you willing to take industrial action short of strike? Are you willing to take industrial action including strike action? And are you willing to support other members taking industrial action if you personally are not willing to do so? When you go on the Civica platform, you'll see a link to a ballot document, and in that there are details which gives you all the background that I've just described for you just now of what we've done to date, information on industrial action and the ballot process, and background about the RCN's Fair Pay for Nursing campaign. Next slide. The most crucial thing for us, of course, is member involvement in relation to this. Large numbers of you need to take part in an indicative ballot to demonstrate your strength of views and feelings. That's the best way for the RCN to understand what you want and for us to campaign with Scottish Government or your employers on your behalf. The ballot will be issued by email to all eligible members who are employed in the NHS. It's completely online, and it's the only formal way that you can have your voice heard. So you can't, for example, write in or get a paper ballot form. You will have to go online to cast your vote in relation to it. And to ensure that you receive your ballot and your voice is heard, you need to check that your membership details are up to date. And there are some really specific things that we need here. An email address that we can contact you on, what your current workplace is and who your employer is. Those are particularly important should we have to go to a ballot for industrial action later. But it would be really helpful for you to go on and make sure that your details are up to date so that we have the most recent information for you. So Again, another very short video. This is just to show people how simple it is to update your details through the RCN portal. So if you just press play, again, there's no narrative. So a very simple process, quick video, just takes a minute to show, and that'll demonstrate to people how they can very quickly go on and check that all of their membership details are up to date. So what might happen next? Next slide, thank you. So following an indicative ballot, that asks people in principle what action they're likely to take or would like to take. And if there's a very strong sense from members that they think that we should take industrial action, then there's another step that we would take after that indicative ballot. I should say to you all that industrial action is a last resort for the RCN. We're not advocating to be on strike, but the fact of the matter is around 70% of our members rejected the pay award, and we are obliged to now ask you what you want to do. And should you come back and tell us that you feel so strongly that you want to take industrial action if the government can't improve their offer, then that's a course of action that we will consider. A statutory industrial action ballot is what would happen next in those circumstances if large numbers of people said they were either willing to take strike action or action short of a strike. And a statutory industrial action ballot is a legal requirement. You cannot legally take any industrial action unless you have had a proper industrial action ballot. And there are loads of steps that need to be taken before you can arrive at that point, and we're nowhere near that yet. So if a statutory ballot does happen, enough of our members need to have indicated that it would take some form of industrial action, and there are other avenues that we could then use to try and improve pay. But the thresholds are quite high. The legal requirements for taking industrial action are difficult to meet. So in Scotland, around 50% of all eligible members must vote for any industrial action to be regarded as lawful. So that's a huge number of our members would have to respond to that ballot. And underneath that, there's an element called important public services, and there are parts of the NHS where members would be regarded as engaged in important public services. And then 40% of all eligible members to vote must vote in favour of that industrial action. So the majority of members are not engaged in important public services, then a simple majority will suffice. So areas like ICU, inpatient acute psychiatry are places that would be regarded as important public services where a general surgical ward wouldn't, for example. But nonetheless, the thresholds are quite high. So for illustrative purposes, although we've got 45,000 members in Scotland, if the RCN had 1,000 members that were eligible to be balloted, at least 500 of them must vote, and the majority of them must vote in favour of industrial action for it to be lawful. And in areas where important public services are in place, at least 400 must vote to support that industrial action. So those thresholds are high, and that's why it's crucially important that you personally vote. So straight after the indicative ballot, verification, when the ballot closes, the results will be verified by Civica. The RCN Scottish Board will then analyse the results and the level of turnout and consider what steps are the right steps to take next. We can't preempt what those discussions and decisions of the board will be, and following the outcome of the ballot, there are a range of options that they can consider. If there's a strong vote in favour of taking industrial action, the RCN Scotland board will present its proposals to the RCN's Trade Union Committee, which is made up of elected members. And I should say that should you vote to take industrial action, the only committee of the RCN that can authorise that is council, so it would then go to council for authorisation. And the RCN, of course, will communicate with its members as soon as possible following the ballot results so that you guys know where we are. So what do you need to do now? The RCN is mandated to do what you, its members, want to do. It's not me as a member of staff who decides what's the right course of action. You are the people who will decide what we do next. So check your details are correct and respond to the ballot where you can. Don't miss your chance to have your say for yourself, for the profession and for the patients that you look after. And spread the word. It's a difficult time for us to do this type of campaign. Normally, all of my staff would be out and amongst members on hospital sites and in communities talking to people, and we can't do that just now because of COVID. So we're going to rely on you guys helping us out here. So if you believe that your profession needs and deserves fair pay, it can only be achieved by you all working together. So talk to your fellow nurses and RCN members at work. Talk to family and friends about the campaign and make the case for fairer pay in as many ways and places as you can. And please, if you're talking to other nurses, encourage them to do the same. Tell them that if they are an RCN member, they should have received a ballot. If they haven't, go on and update their details, and they will. As many of you as possible need to respond. Find out more at the rcn.org.uk/fair pay Scotland. There is one of those things that you can just put your phone at. It will take it like a picture and take you directly into the website, and that there'll be loads of resources that you can see there, all of the background to the campaign, information about how to make sure you cast your ballot correctly. All of that kind of stuff is hosted there. So please share that and allow other people that you work with to know that they too can come on and give us their views. So that's the presentation. I'm going to move us on to questions. Julie's not joined us. Normally she would chair and field the questions, so you're just going to have Graham and I. So as I've been doing a bit of talking, I'm going to throw the first question at Graham. So Graham, we have a question that's come in from a nurse who said, I work for a GP, can I vote as I did not get an email?
Although it might seem in all its essentialness a very, very simple question. The question that we need to ask is, are you actually employed under Agenda for Change? There are a number of practices within Scotland that are actually direct NHS employees. There are a number of practices in Scotland, and the majority of the practices in Scotland are actually GP small businesses, if you like, and are therefore not under Agenda for Change. So you may well have terms and conditions that match Agenda for Change and mirror Agenda for Change, but you would not be part of the NHS workforce under Agenda for Change. However, if you are employed by a GP practice, which is a direct practice that has been set up by NHS Scotland, or NHS Scotland is your main employer, then that way you would be under Agenda for Change, and therefore you would receive a ballot. The best thing to do is to actually contact RCN Direct and to actually just have that query with them, and they have a note of all of the employers that are involved in relation to what are the NHS employers. Norma, I don't know if there's anything else to add to that.
No, that's fine. There are some directly employed staff working in GP practices, and as Graham says, there are others who are employees of GPs, and they wouldn't be able to take industrial action because the NHS is not their employer. So if you're uncertain about that, just check who your employer is. It'll be on your payslip, yep. And if you're an RCN member and work under the auspices of the NHS, then you would be entitled to vote. But Graham, another question's come in. People are asking, and I get that asked this quite commonly, that wards are really poorly staffed already. So how would taking industrial action help? And what do you think the public will think about industrial action from nurses?
It's a really challenging question, that, and we do. I'm frequently asked the same question, and it's one that I know that the rep community's asked. The thing about it is that we actually are currently in a staffing crisis in Scotland. There are just under 5,000 vacancies. If you can imagine what it's like, 1 in 10 district nurses or community nurses are not available. 1 in 10 mental health nurses. The vacancy rate across Scotland is around 7%. If we do not do something that uses and attracts people into the profession first and foremost to actually recruit new people in, then we're actually not able to. I always imagine this like a bath We're actually, at the moment, what we've got is a bath that we're trying to fill with the bath plug out, and basically the people who are in the job at the moment are actually all leaving the job, and we're not replacing them. And no matter how much and how hard that we try to actually replace, because the salary is not attractive, and that is causing us a problem. So therefore, basically, we keep adding more staff in, but the continual drain of our staff that we've got currently and the expertise that we've got currently in the job is there. So we need to use the lever of pay to make it much more attractive. The other aspect of that is around the skills that are involved, Norman, because actually you should be paid for the expertise, and nursing is the lowest paid profession at this moment in time. It's a graduate profession, but it's the lowest paid graduate profession, and we need to do something to address this, and we need to actually make sure that you feel you are valued for the work that you're doing. So the 4% offer at the moment, I'm very well quoted, a newly registered nurse, it's just over a tenner a week. Enough for a fish supper and a cup of tea, as I put it. You know, we need to do something that actually gives you a substantive increase in your wages, that actually starts to bring you up to the point of understanding that we have had 10 years of cuts, and we are looking to address that. So don't have that dichotomy there. It's a false dichotomy. The challenge is around actually, are you being paid? Are you valued? And has the Scottish Government done enough to recognise you?
Yeah, I think that's really important, Graham. And just to add to that a little bit, I mean, there's a couple of things that strike me about that question. The first thing is, will taking industrial action help? Nobody wants to take industrial action, but we're at a point where we're going to have to try and do something to force a better pay deal for nurses. The fact of the matter is, as Graham said, there are thousands of vacancies in Scotland, and the pressures that are happening in the NHS just now, in my opinion, weren't caused by the pandemic. They were merely exposed by the pandemic. You know, all through the pandemic, the Scottish Government has tried to recruit more people, tempt people who've retired to come back, you know, get people to take short-term contracts to boost the workforce. And at no point over the course of the pandemic have we managed to bridge the gap of the number of vacancies that were already in place. So we have worked with less people all through the pandemic than we should have had in normal times. And the reason we don't have those numbers in normal times is because there aren't enough of them out there. And a whole number of things have impacted upon that. Brexit, for example, lots of nurses used to come from Europe and work in the UK. Now they don't, sometimes because they don't feel welcome, and also because they can't stay in the long term. So why would they? So we are now going to have to domestically recruit and train enough nurses to replace those who will retire in coming years and build up the workforce. And if we don't have a job that young people think is, you know, accessible, where you're valued and you're paid well, then they're going to do other things, and we will not have a sustainable nursing workforce. And the shock to the system, like a pandemic, if that happens again, we will be as ill prepared for the next one as we are for this one. So it's important, particularly for the element that the person said about what the public might think, that we make the public aware that the money is only a small part of it. There's a part of it that says when you have a really safety critical profession, if you don't recruit and retain people and get them to work in it, then they'll not be there when you really, really need them. And that's the risk for the public, as they're going to have a health service that's not properly maintained in terms of the numbers of people. So another couple of questions, Graham. A question has come in saying, if we are getting paid more than the rest of the UK, are we not in a better position than the rest of the UK?
That's undoubtedly the case. If we mean, are we not in a better position in relation to our wages? Our wages are more than the rest of the UK. That is the position, but does that increase or do anything to change? We went out and we asked our members what our members felt their value was. We asked our members where they felt we should be asking. We checked that pay claim out. And then when we went back out to our members, and our members were asked around the 4% that was on offer at that time, and the 2% that was on offer to the bands 8 and senior managers within nursing at that time. And our members have overwhelmingly rejected that. So my question has to be one that I would pose back, and that is basically, we're not doing this because we just feel like it. We're not doing this because our salaries are increased. We're doing this because our members have told us, and the members of the Royal College of Nursing have said quite clearly to us, 2/3 of you have said quite clearly to us that 4% is not enough, and it's not good enough. So I think that's exactly where I need to take that, Norman. I can't.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair point. I would just add a couple of things to it. The first thing is that Colin Pullman, the director of the RCN Scotland, and myself have both been involved in direct negotiations with the Scottish Government around your pay, both in terms of the last year pay deal and the pay deal that's been offered this time round. And it's our job to try and get you the most money that we possibly can get. And I'm not going to make any apology for the fact that we were in there and negotiated in the 3-year deal that came before this one the best deal that we possibly can. In a sense, that's what we're trying to do again here. I don't really want to say, oh, we want to be paid more than everybody else in the UK, but we're fighting with a UK Conservative government who really don't want to increase public spending. And in fact, if the pay award in Scotland is more generous than other parts in the UK, then that can be used as a lever, because eventually people from other parts of the UK are going to say, well, I might as well go and work in Scotland because I'll get paid better up there. So actually the better paid terms and conditions in Scotland can be a lever for other parts of the UK as well, because the RCN's committed, it doesn't matter where you work within the UK, we want to get the best possible pay deal that we can. Now, I'm going to be a bit of a devil here now, because one of the questions that's been put on, so I'm going to ask you, Graham, is why are the other trade unions not fighting for a better offer?
I am not allowed to comment on. I'm not allowed to comment on other trade unions, Norman. You know fine well that's the case. We are directed by our membership. I have said quite clearly that the Trade Union Committee, and I know that Julie feels exactly the same, the Scottish Board will be a member-led decision-making body. So we will make our decisions based on what our members tell us. We will not be doing anything out with that. How other members get to the conclusion that the GMB, basically, they also rejected the pay award. That has been made in Scotland. Unfortunately, or not, depending on the case may be, the GMB have decided to take no further action on that at this moment in time. So what I would say is basically we are, as people have heard me saying, we are an independent trade union. We work on behalf of the Royal College of Nursing members. It would be really, really great if other trade unions were just as ambitious as we were, because they have also suffered the 10 years of austerity. They have also been in that position, but I also recognise that we have got the shape of the workforce is maybe different within the Royal College of Nursing and the bandings, because the bulk of our bandings are between bands 5, 6 and 7, and starts to basically, if the nursing profession triangulates and gets less and less as the further up the tree you go. Whereas the other trade union, the bulk of their membership tends to lie in especially in the larger trade unions, Unite, Unison, and the GMB tends to lie in the lower bandings. So therefore, they are perhaps looking at making sure that the lower side of the pay scales are being addressed more appropriately. But that's speculation rather than actually information from the unions as such. But basically, each union has the responsibility to represent its members as best they can.
Yeah, very politic answer there, Graham. But I just didn't want the person who asked the question to feel that we had dodged it, so I asked it anyway. But Graham is quite right in the sense that we are not making comment about stances taken from other trade unions. But I remind you about something that I said in the presentation. We asked you what you thought you were worth at the very beginning of this campaign, and we based our ask on that. And then we asked you whether or not you found what the Scottish Government were offering you was acceptable, and you said no. So it's really clear that the RCN is doing what its members want. We can't comment on other trade unions and the decision-making processes that they have, but we're representing your interests as nurses, and that's our job to do that. I'm going to ask Graham a quick question, and then I'm going to pull a couple of them together, which I'll take. So Graham, are student nurses who work in the bank allowed to vote?
Student nurses who work in the bank are allowed to vote. We are currently making sure that the process is there for them with Civica to make sure that they are, because they have an employer within the NHS. If they were only student nurses and therefore under education, they would not be eligible to vote. But if they're working for the NHS and the NHS have a bank contract issued with them, they are entitled to vote. We need them to go on to RCN Direct and to update their details with RCN Direct, who have a process in place to ensure that they are captured. But student nurses have got another role, Norman, and student nurses are the biggest campaigners and the biggest advocates for actually getting people and motivating people. And their reach is far wider than somebody of my age and with the colour of my beard than your beard has, because actually their use of social media is far superior to mine and can actually get us involved. So basically, not only get involved, get balloted, have your voice heard, but actually help us join the campaign and get involved in that way as well.
This beard's actually jet black. I diet grey. So a couple of questions about technical things. One of the questions is, why can we not move to industrial action if we vote for it now? So going back into what I said in the presentation, there are a number of statutory things that you have to do before you can take industrial action for that industrial action to be legal. And to do those things without getting a sense of how the members feel wouldn't be the right thing for the RCN to do. So we're having this indicative ballot first of all, so that we can get a sense from you guys about what the appetite for it is. There's no point in us going through the legal processes of starting the machinations of taking industrial action if we're not going to carry the members with us. So this indicative ballot will give us a sense from you guys about what you think we should do next. So if we do get a high response rate and a high number of people who respond say that we should take industrial action, then moving towards a ballot for industrial action would be our next step rather than our first step. A question's also come in about what is action short of strike action. Action short of strike action is about doing what's in your contract and nothing more, and certainly not covering for people who are on strike. So for example, nurses are often at work before their due start time. We would ask you just to turn up when you're expected to start work, not to work beyond the end of your shift, which we know from all of the results that we get from people in terms of our surveys that people quite often do work beyond, filling in paperwork, finishing off tasks that they haven't managed to do. They also do roles as part of the routine that they're not really obliged to do, a lot of admin and clerical type things that aren't involved in direct patient care, which you could say I'm not prepared to do that. Running around the hospital, go down to pharmacy for people, all of that kind of stuff that happens, you're not obliged to do. And in terms of supporting other people who are on strike, if people are on strike in your ward and they say, will you work a bank shift or will you work overtime to provide cover, then if you're saying that you're going to support people who are taking strike action but not taking yourself, I wouldn't be expecting people to come in and do additional hours and back cover for other people who are off. Those are the types of things that would be a good way of supporting other people who are taking industrial action, even if you are not. And that's what's called short of strike action. It's really more commonly regarded as being working to rule. And there's a question in here that says, what can I do as a member to support the RCN? The first thing I would say to you is, I'm not going to ask you how to vote, I'm just going to ask you to vote. That is crucially the most important thing that you can do as an individual right now, is fill in that ballot form and let us know what you think personally about what you would be willing to do. And then the other thing that you could do that would really support the RCN at this point in time is have those discussions with your colleagues. So if you go into a shift and you're changing over with other people, taking just a couple of minutes to say to folk, oh, I'm a member of the RCN and I've got a ballot form to fill in about taking industrial action related to this year's pay award. Is anybody else here RCN members? I was at a presentation and we were asked to remind people to vote. It's crucially important. If you're an RCN member and you've not had an email, there's a way that you can go online and check your details and then you'll get one. So anything that you can do to indicate how you feel personally or crucially encourage other people at your workplace who are RCN members are eligible to vote to do just that. The more that we get from you, the better. And then I'm going to go into another question and then I'll ask Graham one. So there's a question that says, will RCN actually strike? They are renowned as a union who do not strike. You know, I feel quite strongly about this one because I get that played back to me quite a lot, and I have to say to you that as an RCN member of staff, as a nurse when I worked in the NHS, I went on strike. I stood in the line for a week over competitive tendering in 1985. But when I get asked that by people from other unions, I say, when have other unions been on strike? There was a one-day strike related to pensions a few years ago, but aside from that, the last strike that most health trade unions in Scotland took part on happened in 1980. So I would defy people to tell me the time when other unions in Scotland and the NHS have been in strike over the lifetime of the long period of time since the 80s that I started my nursing career. So the RCN has historically not taken industrial action, but the decision about whether or not the RCN will strike doesn't lie with me as a member of staff. It's not up to me whether or not you strike. It's up to you whether or not you strike. It is the members who will decide what we do. All the way through this campaign and process, every decision that's been made has been member-led. Every decision that's been made by the lay members who you elected has been informed by the decisions that you want them to take, by the information that you have given them. So whether or not the RCN strikes is not something that will be decided by the staff. It's something that will be decided by the members. So you tell us whether or not the RCN is going to strike, not us telling you.
Just a minute, Norman, could I come in there as well? Because I think there's an important thing that we actually just need to actually understand here. That if the members tell us that they want to have a strike or they want to go into industrial action, you and the Director of Scotland and all of the RCN staff will be knocking their pans in and working really hard. But the people who will be withdrawing their labour are RCN members. It's the members who go on strike. It's not the staff of the RCN. And basically this entity of this untouchable or this unreachable entity called the RCN, people will say it's a cliche. The RCN is the members, and the members actually are the people who will be taking action or not, or however they decide to take things forward. So there's the member-led decision-making side of it, Norman, but also the fact is that it's the members who have to deliver and to take the action. And it's the members who, if they do take strike action, will not have that day's wage or that half day's wage, because that's your commitment in actually progressing your pay claim. It's not the staff's pay claim, it's your pay claim. And I really feel quite strongly on this, because we cannot, as RCN members, abdicate that responsibility. It's a member responsibility in that area. So thanks, Norman. I really feel quite strongly on that.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to pose what might be a final question to you, Graham, before I'll let you do some final remarks, and I'll do some closing remarks as well. So there's a question about what materials there are to support the campaign. So are there posters and other materials that can be put up in departments and shared with other members?
There are lots of, actually most of the representatives have been sent out a pack, which I received mine today, which came in a box. You used to get an envelope from RCN Scotland when you were a rep with a few posters and bits and bobs, but actually we're now getting somewhere in the region of 200 to 300 leaflets sent out with a big pile of posters, etc. And also, which I found really helpful, instructions on how to put them up, but actually not at all. But there is a vast amount of resources. There are badges, pin badges, there are car bumper stickers. If you go onto the RCN campaign site, the RCN Pay Campaign site. You can order from there. But there are also small business cards, which are really useful for starting conversations. There are, as I said, the A5 leaflets. We're in the process of actually getting leaflets that will be able to be used, much more of a public-facing leaflet about how this pay campaign is not just about pay, but it's actually about the impact that it will have on safe staffing and about patient safety. So we're looking at that as well, and that will be coming online very soon. But leaflets to hand around your wards, the sort of A5 type leaflets, there's a lot of documentation and a lot of campaign materials. And if there's anything else, also through your branches do have a stock of or have the ability to get some stock in. And if there's any sort of events going to be happening outside the hospitals, I know that some branches have actually ordered gazebos, which actually should keep the rain away. It won't keep the cold out, but it will keep the rain away in Scotland if you do decide to do sort of events. If you can't go around the wards, there may be something that you can do outside the hospitals or outside the grounds of the hospitals. So, yeah.
Cool, that's helpful. I would say to people that it is difficult for my staff to get out amongst members just now because of the pandemic. So there are resources being sent out to reps. They will be dropping them in hospitals. If in your ward you get a drop and you know of other areas where there isn't a lot of stuff, canteens and things like that, and you could take some stuff down from your ward, leave them there so that other members could get them, that would be fantastic, because the more people see the resources, the better. I would also say that in terms of the presentation that I did for you earlier, both my staff and our stewards will be out doing those presentations over the course of the period of time that the ballot is open for. By the end of this week, I hope to confirm that we'll have more than 50 presentations booked for us to get out amongst the members electronically and do it. So by all means, if you could tell other members that you have been to this presentation tonight, encourage them to look for opportunities to come along and engage with us, then that would be really helpful. But I'm going to stop because we have very little time left in relation to the hour that we set aside for this presentation. So I just want to take a few minutes for Graham to see. Graham, do you have any closing remarks that you would like to say?
My closing remarks are probably going to be closing remarks that you will echo, Norman, because my closing remarks is that the power of the RCN belongs to the membership itself. RCN members need to let us know. I really, my vote is as powerful as your vote. It has no stronger sort of power. I have made my vote and I've committed myself to the ballot. I did that yesterday when it opened, as you would probably expect. But I need to hear from the majority, the vast majority, and as many RCN members as we possibly can, because the outcome of the ballot gives us the strength and the power in any of the conversations that we are going to be having later. So that's, for me, Norman, that's it. It's in your hands now, members.
Yep, I think I would echo that. I think it's really important that whatever you take out of this, that you understand that it's the members themselves that need to make these decisions. These are crucial decisions for the RCN to take, and a difficult time to even consider taking industrial action. But you have indicated to us by around 70% of you rejecting the offer that was made by Scottish Government that you're deeply unhappy with what's been offered to you. So the issue is now, what do you want to do about it? Because we can't take that action for you as members of staff. The organisation can't push that on for you. It's members that need to decide what the right thing to do now is. And we really need to hear that in numbers. The thresholds I explained to you earlier, the fact that if we were to progress onto a ballot for industrial action, we have to hit a threshold of 50% of our members voting in that ballot of all of our eligible members. And in some areas, to take industrial action, 40% of the membership would have to vote to take any kind of action. So if people now just sit in their hands and don't tell us what they think, the people who have to make those decisions, like the Trade Union Committee, which Graham chairs, or council, if we have to consider taking some form of industrial action, it's really difficult for them to say what our next course of action should be unless it's informed by what the members think that we should do. So from my perspective, I would say vote as quickly as you can, spread the word to your colleagues about the fact that the RCN is doing this at this point in time, encourage your peers to vote. I'm not going to ask you to go out and try and suggest to people how they should vote, to persuade them one way or the other. I don't think it's right for me to ask you to do that as members. What I am asking you to do as members is commit yourself to voting, to give us an indication of what you personally would be willing to do, and encourage all of your peers and all of the people that you work alongside to do exactly the same thing. Now, this presentation, I understand that at the moment, the way people are working, the additional hours that people are doing, the very limited downtime, it's hard to get it out to everybody and for everybody to come on to calls and stuff because people are exhausted and need some downtimes with their family. So this whole session has been recorded and it will be shared on YouTube. So you can tell people that they can look this up online on YouTube and they'll be able to see the presentation for themselves. There are a whole number of other opportunities for the presentation to be delivered largely by my staff or by reps. As I say, by the beginning of next week, I hope to be able to confirm that we'll have around 50 of those in place. And this whole session has been completely run again in the way that it has been this evening on the 28th of October. So please go out and share with fellow members the absolute importance of member engagement in relation to this and all of the opportunities that they have to hear what we've got to say about the campaign and where we are and how we've got to where we are at this point in time, and more crucially even for you to tell us what you think we should do next, because it's in your gift to decide what the RCN does next. That's what we expect of you. So I'm going to close there. We're just a minute or so away from time. There are no questions, additional questions that have come up to the screen. Apologies again from Julie. I know that she would have desperately wanted to have been on the panel with us tonight, and to be fair to her, has been in virtually everything that we've done over the last 6 months. Just had a bit of an IT failure tonight, so I'm sure that Julie will be with us again in the one on the 28th of October. So thank you all for attending. Crucially important that we get the message out. So thank you for taking the time in your busy schedule to come along this evening and hear what we're doing. And just as an aside, something I've been saying to members at a whole host of forums that I've done over the last 6 months or so, we understand how hard you're working right now in the pandemic. And it has been absolutely exhausting for all of the activity that you've had to do and how difficult it's been for you to work over the last year and a half during this pandemic. I just want to thank you for your service, because I think that too often people don't do that. So thank you very much for the very, very hard work that you're doing. And finally, from me, just a big thank you to Graham, as Chair of the Trade Union Committee, from coming along tonight and supporting us in this panel discussion. Thank you.